Midnight Family tells the story of the Ochoa family, who run a private ambulance in Mexico City, a city where the government has less than 45 public ambulances. So they are responding to patients that sometimes would be left without any care at all, but they slowly find themselves juggling these pretty big ethical dilemmas between staying afloat as a family and treating patients properly.
This film identifies a pretty big problem in a very, very big city, which has about 9 million people in it. How did you come to make this film? How did you come to find yourself in the back of one of these privately run ambulances, capturing this family going to from accident to accident, struggling to make ends meet? How did you come to make this film?
It was fairly spontaneous how I met the Ochoa family, but I was living in Mexico City already and shooting actually a completely different project. But one morning I woke up and met this family, and their ambulance just parked in front of my apartment building. And I was intrigued about the idea of what a family-run ambulance would look like, and asked if I could ride along for a night to see them work. And in that first experience, saw this cutthroat underground world of these private ambulances competing for patients, and thought that it would make an amazing movie.
Now, I understand that you shot 85 days over a span of 3 years.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you had hundreds of hours of footage.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the main discipline that dictated how you were going to select the footage? Because I can imagine you could have made a series out of the footage.
Yeah, it's such a tricky process of embedding yourself with a family and kind of filming everything that seems interesting, and then going back to the editing booth and selecting what works. And with this film, I knew from the very beginning that it would be kind of 5 or 6 main accidents, and I wanted each accident to kind of raise the ethical stakes of this balance between, is this family saving lives, or is this family, kind of taking advantage of people, and playing with that balance throughout the film. So the shoot was really this search for these 6 accidents that built on each other to this final climax where the survival of the family and the survival of the patient kind of clashes into itself in a pretty thought-provoking and crazy way.
Do you have a purpose for the film? Is the film intended to do something or impart a particular message, or did you just want to capture the lives of these people and not editorialize?
Yeah, the film is first and foremost a story about a family trying to make ends meet, and kind of leans into the power of storytelling to create empathy and give viewers an experience they never would ever otherwise have. That being said, we are releasing the film in Mexico and hope that we can get it in front of the right people there to kind of raise some awareness. And also around the world, it's kind of a warning call to what the for-profit medical services look like, and what happens when money is so deeply infused into the decisions that are made around care and healthcare.
You actually had a screening of this film in Mexico City in April, didn't you?
Yes, yep.
How did it go? Were there riots? Was there controversy? What happened?
So we screened in the center of Mexico City, and about 3,000 people showed up. It was an outdoor screening, and a moment that I'll never quite forget. There were ambulances and police cars kind of circling around and going to accidents and coming back to keep watching the film, and it went overwhelmingly well. I think there's a element of humor and kind of a dark comedy element to the film that really comes out more in Mexico than anywhere else. I think it's a culture that has a custom of kind of looking at really dark realities with always a sense of humor, and that really came through in a surprising, sometimes uncomfortable, but ultimately a really fulfilling way.
What does the situation that you've captured in the film say about Mexico. I mean, it's kind of like a barometric reading
Yeah.
of a society when you look at a particular part of it. So what do you think the film says about Mexico, which one would have thought by now would have been a developed world?
I think ultimately, through the lens of this one family, you see what happens when the government does not take care of its citizens, and when a country that is about 60% fueled by an informal economy. So 2/3 of the people in Mexico work in some sort of unofficial job. The Ochoa family has chosen emergency medicine as their niche. And you see how corruption from really high up in the government kind of trickles down through law enforcement, through this family and their ambulance, to really the life and death of people on the street of Mexico City. And you see kind of this food chain of victims, the patients kind of being victimized for profit, the Ochoa family being victimized by law enforcement, the law enforcement being victimized by the larger government, and it gives you a pretty visceral feeling for how corruption really makes its way to people's care, people's life and death.
Now you're from Connecticut, I understand?
Yeah.
Right, I just wanted to because that's heartland America. And America at the moment is in a singular situation.
Yeah.
Are you concerned that people will politicize your film and use it as an argument to further a particular agenda that you might not agree with? Is that a concern for you?
It's not really. I think, if anything, the film is kind of a strong argument against private healthcare, and so if the film were to be politicized, I think it would be fighting for something that I personally believe in, which is free public healthcare for all. That being said, it's not a very political film, and as I said in the beginning, it's first and foremost a story about a family, trying to make ends meet.
How did you go about getting consent for some of these scenes? Because some of it's pretty brutal, and there's a scene towards the end where you're capturing somebody, a mother, in what is obviously, or one presumes, the worst moment of her life.
Yeah.
And she's there on camera.
Yeah.
How do you get consent for a scene like that?
The process of getting permission from patients or relatives of patients was really a case-by-case basis, and I want to say about half of the accidents that the ambulance showed up to were things that I just kind of turned the camera off and didn't film because somebody asked me not to, or it didn't feel right. And then half of the accidents were moments where people, in a kind of a surprising way, did give me permission and wanted to kind of share their story. The mother at the end of the film was actually somebody that I filmed in kind of the first few days of being in this ambulance, quite unknowingly. The camera was set up in the front precisely to avoid filming anybody in the back of the ambulance. And she got in, and I filmed this journey to the hospital and almost deleted the footage because I felt kind of uncomfortable with how it had played out. But I saved it and eventually showed it to an old film professor of mine months later, and he convinced me to go and find that mother. So about 6 months after that accident, I went and knocked on her door and talked to her about the film, and it turned out that her daughter had been studying journalism, and she thought that the film was something she would want to participate in. So she ultimately gave me the permission, but it's kind of one example of trying to, on a case-by-case basis, connect and explain the importance of the film to all the people who show up.
Now, in that same sequence, although it's not on camera, you can hear the audio of the father asking her for money.
Yeah, it's actually the mother. It's the same.
Asking the mother, who's...
Oh, right.
And it's soul crushing just to hear that,
Yeah.
it really kind of highlights just how degrading and how embarrassing
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
but in an absolutely extreme way.
Yeah. Yeah. How do they cope? I think the film tries to show you the hardship of just trying to make ends meet in what is a cutthroat world of healthcare. You see the father of the family is just kind of popping pills, throughout the whole film, and seems like he's about on the brink of a heart attack. He's been in this ambulance for 10 plus years, and it is beaten down on him physically and emotionally to the point where he is often just quite numb. So it's a really tough life.
Now, what kind of cameras were you using? Because they seem quite oblivious to your presence. So I'm keen to know what the process of acclimatization was, and also just what you were shooting on.
I shot the film with 2 Sony FS7s. One was mounted on the hood of the ambulance, and another one was with me in the back. And the process of getting them used to that equipment was something that unfolded over the course of 3 years, and really embedding myself and being there every single night, to the point where I was kind of, an afterthought and not something that stuck out.
What is the life of a movie like this? You finished it last year?
We finished the film in, I guess, early January, really.
Okay.
It premiered at Sundance at the end of that month, and has been doing festivals around the world. We're pretty close to slotting almost 100 festivals in countries all over the globe. It has been picked up for distribution in multiple other territories. Here in Australia, it will be released theatrically in probably February or March. It'll be released in November in the US. So it'll start in kind of art house indie cinemas, and then kind of find a home somewhere online.
And what about you? Can you tell me just a bit about you? You were born in Connecticut.
I grew up in Connecticut, just off the border of New York City. Went to school out in California and studied art history, but have been making films since I was 10 years old, starting with just skateboarding films of me and my friends, and slowly evolving into bigger stories. And I think I'm fascinated by documentaries, especially ones that are cinematic and lean into the kind of experiential and sensorial possibilities of cinema, take people places they otherwise would never go.